getting one. I'm a rhino, I'm a hornet toad. Netherlands to Borneo.
Very mysterious, very elusive animal that only a handful of people in the world have seen. Wow.
Being like, Tiburon, and I look up as I have this fish upside down and I'm implanting a tag into an incision, and there's a 6-foot shark swimming directly at us, and we're just like, uh-oh, we're like,
run for that fucking vehicle.
You're seeing this like
Wild and unprotected, planet Earth we can't neglect it. Nature sexy, we need this place, so please respect it.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Wild and Unprotected, brought to you by Podcast. So I'm your host for today. My name is Catalina Smith, for those of you who don't know me. Ethan is not here today, so I'm taking over, and we've got a very special guest with us today. So he's the founder and director of Reef Safe PR, and his name is Gray. So hi Gray, how are you today? How are you doing?
Kat, doing really, really well. Thank you guys so much for having me.
It's great to have you. So tell us a bit more about yourself, who you are, and how you ended up with Reef Safe.
Yeah, bit of a weird journey probably compared to most conservationists. My name is Gray. I'm 24 years old. I live in Puerto Rico. I moved here around 3 years ago and just have absolutely fallen in love with the island. I'm originally from New Orleans and bounced around from place to place, whether it be hurricanes or university. And I've just been absolutely enjoying my time in Puerto Rico and hope to stay here and work with the island and restoring its coastal zones and its reefs. I'm kind of been on a weird journey in terms of getting into reef restoration, especially. Like a lot, growing up in the South and New Orleans especially, you're not exposed to a lot of outdoorsiness. You know, you have the swamps, which pretty much everything there is trying to kill you. And that's about it. You know, it's miserably hot most of the year. You don't want to go outside. But once I moved away to France as a kid, I got to fall in love with the ocean. And then moving to Vancouver for university, I got to fall in love with surfing and skiing in the outdoors and mountains. And moving to Puerto Rico, I've got to fall in love with the world of underwater.
So as far as I know, you started off with a different field of science and eventually made your way into marine biology. So tell me about that transition and tell them what you started in, because I was quite surprised when you told me the story.
Yeah, so I was studying in university at University of British Columbia, and COVID came around in my third year. And, you know, classes were all online. I already wasn't a great student with classes being in person. And when they went online, it absolutely lost me. So what ended up happening was I moved back to New Orleans to start working with COVID research. And we were running COVID trials with an antibody trial to treat people who actively had COVID infections. And we were running a testing clinic. And, you know, with COVID, they kind of just needed everyone and anyone that they could find to work with it. And so we worked 6-hour days for six days a week, 12-hour days for months and months and months. And then eventually the research company expanded to Puerto Rico. And having very terrible Spanish, they were like, you should go and expand our clinics down there.
I mean, I guess at that point you already spoke French fluently.
Yes,
Am I right?
yes. Having lived in France, it made picking up Spanish quite a bit easier.
Yeah, Spanish, French, English. Eventually you go adding up like all the list of languages, don't you?
Yeah. So once COVID slowed down, other research studies could start picking up just because you couldn't do other research while there was a global epidemic going on. And we started doing other studies in Puerto Rico and just started expanding, you know, what my field incorporated. We started building a specialized cellular lab here in Puerto Rico to process cells, and started doing more vaccine trials. And eventually the workload got to the point where I wasn't getting to enjoy living in Puerto Rico, just because I was working too much. And So I left the medical research and the human trials department and was unemployed for a little bit, figuring out myself, surfing way too much, and eventually started thinking about, coral reefs while I was surfing. And I had lived in Hawaii for a couple of months before that, and noticing the difference in how reefs are doing based on their exposure to tourists and people going out and spending time in them. It made me think about how in Hawaii they had laws prohibiting the sale of certain chemical sunscreens. And it just seemed like a no-brainer that this should be something that exists here in Puerto Rico. There's a product that's damaging the island and the people living on the island. Why wouldn't we prevent it from being sold? So then I started researching that, thinking maybe I could just do a little side gig about, trying to start this political movement, start trying to ban sunscreens. And then I started learning about coral reefs, and it was all over. I had to work with corals. I had to do a project that allowed me to get hands-on experience with them and work at restoring the reefs themselves. And so that was October already. That was about 6 months ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And ever since, I've been learning as much as I can and volunteering everywhere I can to get as much hands-on experience, and then have started the process of having my own farms and really just starting this project and with as much energy and enthusiasm as possible.
I guess that's quite cool. Like, you must learn stuff actively, like every day on the job, like not coming from perhaps that usual, like,
Yeah,
biological background or like marine biology background, but the fact that you've got this like ignited passion in you and that pushes you to keep learning every day about these species that's just
yeah,
so fun.
that's one of the most common questions. Like, did you study marine biology? Like, were you always in love with the ocean? I was like, I just happened. I've always been in love with the ocean and water sports, but I just happened into this department and fell in love with it, which means I know absolutely nothing compared to most people in this field, which is great because I love learning on the job.
Mm-hmm.
It was really funny the first time that I volunteered with other nonprofits.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to see what kind of work was involved, and I wanted to learn from people doing it. And the responsibilities for most of the responsibilities are not academic at all. It's all very manual labor, like moving things, cleaning things, maintaining corals, that doesn't require all this vast knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really funny meeting all these really brilliant, well-studied, well-educated marine biologists. We're like, I'm so excited. I get to scrub the corals. This is great. This is great because it's my kind of people. It's
You're like,
marine nerds
this is
who want to go do things with their hands.
I think that like that's so important to highlight to people that are listening is people think that there's a one kind of approach to marine biology. And I think not only with you, but with other guests, we've shown that you don't necessarily have to have the kind of marine background. But if you have a passion for it, passion can take you far enough with it as long as you're dedicated. And if that is like you're ready to get your hands dirty, like spend hours on a boat, get seasick, or like just spend so much time investing in it, as long as you've got that dedication, it doesn't really like, obviously a degree is great, but at the end of the day, if you've got that passion for it, then you can learn, and like it takes you a long way as well. I think that's really great to kind of point out is like, I think science is overall, especially science related to conservation, it's all about the passion that you have. You can study a degree and not be passionate and then do nothing with it. If you've got a passion that pushes you forward, then pursue that, go for it. So
Yeah, I'm very lucky that I'm passionate about a field that is so much in need.
mhm.
If I were passionate about radiology and I was like, really want to be radiologist, haven't done any med school, and then there'd be no hope of me getting a job outside of maybe cleaning the machine with a sponge.
No,
But
but
here
in this industry, yeah, it kind
in
of
this industry, there's always more to be done, and there's always an extra hand that's needed. And what surprised me was there's always in need of another organization, right? For size of Puerto Rico, there's not too many organizations that are doing the work that's needed. We have amazing, well-funded, well-equipped organizations that are doing amazing work, but for the amount of work that is needed, we've got a fraction of what should be here.
I think that leads quite well to the next point, because I think the reason you can work that well, like with passion fully, is because these places or the marine like environments are surrounded by passionate local people and passionate communities. So I think that leads quite well to one of like something that I think we spoke about a little bit, but Reef Safe is very focused on community and getting people involved. So as far as I know, your aims is kind of conservation and like community education. So can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. Community around the reefs here is very, I guess, bipolar, because you have people who are absolutely in love with the island and in love with reefs and protecting them and marine conservation. And then you have this large chunk of the community that has no relationship with the ocean, which surprised me immensely when I moved here. I figured I was moving to a tropical island and everyone would surf and it would be this island Caribbean life. But especially in the metro area here in San Juan, much of the community sees the ocean as dangerous, which, to be fair, it is, right?
Very valid.
The ocean
Yeah.
is a place that you do not want to cross on a bad day. But building that relationship for the community with this idea of like, this is what we're protecting. This is a part of the island that you should love. And we're doing that in a couple of different ways. One of them that I'm most excited about is our education program for youths that we're developing. We're currently working alongside another organization that's already doing youth programs and summer school programs and taking them out on reefs and educating them about corals. We're in the midst of developing our own, where we want to take people from schools, children from schools, and bring them into the ocean and show them this is what coral is. This is what a reef is. This is how the ecosystem works together, lighting that passion for the island and for the oceans. And youth is just, I find, incredibly.
I think it's important, especially in the younger generations, to form that kind of bond with nature. I think now more than ever, I think we're quite similar ages. And I think even in, like, I notice it personally in my generation compared to my parents' like generation, there's such a difference in that awareness. So I think in spaces where there might be that kind of conflict or divide, it's so important to kind of bring those two groups together and kind of make it more normalized, more accepted. I know you said that a lot of people don't swim there, so that would be a great way to get people involved as well.
Yeah, one of my first jobs ever was working at my mother's swim school, and teaching kids and adults how to swim. And it is one of the most rewarding things to have a 60-year-old woman learn how to swim the full length of a pool and just be like bright-eyed, huge smile, like go back to a child's energy. Because she's always wanted to swim, and finally at age 60, she decided, this year's the year.
And then that kind of like, it makes you appreciate the ocean. Like, I have a few friends here in the UK that just don't grow up learning how to swim. I mean, here in the UK, we're quite isolated. So some people don't feel the need to learn, and it's really cold as well. So probably I give them that. But there's not that sense of needing to. But I think especially when you're around the ocean and you can enjoy the nature and just kind of, you feel a lot more connected, I feel like, when you're in the ocean. And being able to do that through swimming is obviously great. But it's what you were saying as well, like when you went to Hawaii, I'm guessing you noticed the fact that people are swimming in the ocean with sun creams that are damaging for the corals. Like, that also must cause a bit of conflict. So how is your organization trying to find like the balance between like, okay, get people in the oceans, but also not destroying the corals that are there?
Yeah, it's especially today, you have to research so many products, right? You have to research the detergent you use to make sure it doesn't have carcinogens in it. You have to make sure that your food is not sourced from a place that the plant is mistreating animals. There's all these things that you have to be aware of. And if it's not possible to know how to do everything or what's the right way to do everything. And so that's why banning the sale of chemical sunscreens is kind of just a no-brainer, because it's removing one more thing that people would have to worry about.
Mhm.
And they don't make it easy. Like, reef friendly and reef safe are two labels that people put on sunscreens, that companies put on sunscreens. Reef safe doesn't have an actual definition. It's not enforced by any organization. Reef friendly means even less. And, companies can put these labels on their sunscreens and they mean absolutely nothing. And so you now have customers that have to go through the chemicals and the ingredients list, which I guess we could go over now. There's 4 big ones to avoid. One of them is oxybenzone. The second is octinoxate. There's avobenzone and octocrylate. And the reason that these chemicals are so bad for the corals is that it affects their reproduction. It affects their cycles. Corals are, especially mass spawning corals, have very sensitive reproduction patterns. And if you're throwing chemicals that affect that on them, it's already in a endangered population that you're now throwing even more pollutants on to mess with them and their reproduction. And so instead of having, our buyers, our consumers, our tourists, our citizens learning the names of chemicals that they need to avoid when they buy a sunscreen, just make it so that it's not available. Because it's not good for the reefs and it's not good for us. There's so much research going on right now about these same chemicals that affect the reefs negatively, affecting humans negatively, and us absorbing them at much higher rates than research previously thought. And affecting our hormone production. And,
Wow.
nothing's conclusive enough to make an actual change immediately, unfortunately. But with enough research and enough headlines, we're hoping that eventually all the sunscreens that are currently harming the reefs and harming our peoples are no longer sold.
Is there any reason why they do use it? Like, is there any, like, as you said, like, if it's damaging, is there any reason why companies are still deciding to produce sun creams with them rather than without them?
Well, it's affordable. That's a big one. And the other one is, I think, it's just, it worked, right? When you discover something works, you realize, oh, if we have avobenzone as an active ingredient in sunscreen, gets rid of 97% of harmful sun rays. It's amazing. And then, if you're creating something new, it's hard to study something long enough to say, oh, so we've been researching this product for 10 years and now we know it's safe, right? That's not the standard of how we do things. We're very much a patch and go society where we say,
Yeah, we go and then after we see like the repercussions of it.
we made a mistake. We got to undo all
Yeah,
that.
quick, go, stop using this, quick, 3, 2, 1. Eliminate. I mean, same with like hairspray, and like people use the hairsprays ridiculously and then suddenly they're like, oh, no, stop, ban.
There's the baby powder incident years ago where it's
I
just
didn't
like,
know that was a thing. My friend told me like a few weeks ago. I was like, what? You're not meant to use baby powder. Obviously, don't need it now that I'm a full grown adult. But still, I was like, what? And like, it's like we're such a society that just goes with things and then you realize the consequences of like your actions. And hopefully, like now that it's been spoken about more, I mean, when I traveled to Hawaii a few months ago, I noticed that it was completely banned, like at the airport, anything they make you throw it away. And that kind of regulation, if you could enforce that in more tropical or coastal places, would be great. But you don't really hear about it. I didn't hear about it until I went to Hawaii and had that experience. So that's great that you're trying to.
So as of now, Hawaii has done it. Hawaii has done a chemical sunscreen ban of sale. I do believe you can fly into the island with it, but I wouldn't recommend it. That's not good for the reefs. And St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands has done a chemical sunscreen ban, and I believe certain cities in Florida. And so there's a precedent. We have the research, we have the legal basis, and now it's just a matter of getting things moving, which is what,
Well, hopefully Puerto Rico soon.
yes, hopefully soon, Puerto Rico.
So that's how Reef Safe kind of started. You mentioned about how you started focusing on kind of banning that or like getting petitions out and that kind of work. But how did it evolve into what it is now, and what kind of projects does it like cover now?
What do we do now? So yeah, the three, we've touched on two of them. One is banning and petitioning for the ban of chemical sunscreens in Puerto Rico. The other is education, doing community events and youth programs. And the third is the hands-on work, which is coral nurseries and outplanting corals. There's this really, really cool field of research that's brand new. The process is called coral fragmentation. And it was discovered by accident, I believe, where a scientist lost a sample that broke off and then months later saw that it was growing and thought, this isn't possible. Corals are so fragile, they aren't able to sustain themselves, but then it completely revolutionized coral restoration. And so the process is you have a colony of coral out in nature, and it's possible that natural developments cause the coral to break, right? Waves, storms, interactions with species, right? Cause a fragment of the coral to break off. Now that coral's immediate response is to multiply and grow and attach to a sediment. And so its growth rate increases and it tries desperately to hang on to a rock and survive. And so we are able to take advantage of that natural process and grow corals at a much faster rate using coral nurseries, which are really incredible structures that people are building and farming and allowing us to restore reefs at an unprecedented rate.
It sounds so cute when you say it's like not coral
Well,
nurseries. It's like, oh,
taking care of my babies.
yeah. And for those of you that don't know, I know we had a discussion about it, but people don't know that corals are animals, not plants, not weird things that grow in random places.
Yeah, most people think they are some sort of living rock or plant, but they are actually animals. They are related to jellyfish, and they are one of the coolest animals I've ever encountered, especially after starting to study them and learn more about them. They are this creature that develop a skeleton and grow their skeleton out of calcium and then grow into these incredible structures that are attached to a rock that don't move. And then they eat and have symbiotic relationship with other animals and other algae. And it's the most incredible animal. That's why I fell in love with them, because the more you research them, the more you just, this is such an incredible product of nature. I have to do whatever protective.
I think when you learn that they're an animal, a type of plant or anything else, like it makes you not relate to them more, but sympathize with what's happening more. Because I think if you think of corals as just a rock that broke off, and you're like, oh, what shame. Like it's harder to sympathize with a rock versus an animal. Like these are things that actually grow. These are things that die. These are things that eat. They reproduce. All of that. And when you see it as that, then also it forms that kind of like a bit more of a connection. And when you say that they're grown in nurseries as well, that for me, I'm just like, that's it. I'm sold. I'm convinced.
Glad it's working.
Hopefully it works for the listeners as well. But yeah, I think it's important to have these kind of conversations where you bring up, actually, this is what it is. It's not something else. It is literally just a little living being in the ocean like anything else. But also, like, I guess, I don't know how the projects are going so far with the nursery, but not only would it help the corals, but it helps all the other marine life that's around the island and all of the ecosystem as a whole. No,
corals provide for over 70% of all marine life, whether it be food, whether it be shelter, whether it be just contributing to a major ecosystem or building a reef where the ecosystem can thrive. Corals play a huge part in all marine life. and they cover less than 1% of the ocean. So you have this huge dependence on such a minute population. And so what happens is if that population starts struggling, starts receding, you now all of a sudden have problems across an entire ecosystem. And if we keep letting things go at the rate that they have been, you know, we'll see immediate effects, right? There's all these causes and these organizations that say, you know, we have to stop the tree farming in the Amazon, and we have to save this species of penguin in South Africa. Great organizations that have a huge mission, but I guess coral reefs have the privilege of saying, if we don't solve this now, it's an immediate issue. It's not, you know, generations down the line won't be able to see this species, or it's not that this tree will go extinct in 200 years. It's that, you know, we'll see direct impacts in all aspects of our lives, in tourism, in fishing, in coastal erosion, in storm intensity. Coral reefs play a huge, huge part of so many different fields of human life. And so that's why they garner and deserve so much attention, is because without them, you know, an entire ecosystem disappears.
And people don't understand how sensitive they are as well. Like, they're so sensitive.
Yes, they
Like,
are.
the tiniest change in temperature, they're like, peace out, I'm gone.
Yeah, no. So temperature, pH, acidity, pollution, these are the major contributors to reef erosion and reef die. Climate change is obviously one of the biggest impactors due to called coral bleaching. It's a process, for those of you who don't know, where you've probably seen it actually if you've spent any time in the ocean or thumbed through ocean magazines, is if you ever see a coral that's got some white discoloration or turned completely white, that process is called bleaching. Corals have a relationship with an algae that lives inside its cells, and you know, they cohabitate and they say, hey, listen, I'll protect you if you give me food. And so the corals protect this algae, and as long as the algae are happy, they feed the corals. The issue is if it gets too hot for too long, the algae peace out. You know, they don't want to hang out with the corals anymore, and that leads the corals to starve to death, which is a very terrible, terrible thing. Like, when I first learned that, I remembered I was like, oh, these are all starving animals? What do you mean?
It sounds so much like it just really hits the heart. It's like, what? Like, all of them are just hungry and like, stop. No.
Yeah. And so a big part of, you know, people say like, oh, sunscreen's only a tiny fraction of what's happening. What's the point of banning sunscreen if it only changes a little bit? And the point is that we can't make huge change in a blink of an eye, right? All we can do is fix the small things until the small things add up. You know, sunscreen pollution is just one more thing on top of the list that are making corals struggle. And if we can remove that one thing, that's a success, and we're on the right direction.
Well, you have to go kind of ticking the list, don't you? I think if everyone has that kind of approach of, or like, I'm not going to recycle because my neighbor doesn't, so what's the point of me doing it? Like, if you have that kind of attitude, then overall, like, you don't realize all the little things that contribute act together to make a bigger change. And it's like, well, if we can stop that, like ban chemical sunscreens, then you can move on to the next thing, and slowly go checking off the list, and slowly populations will start to get better. But I think we live in a very like pessimist society sometimes, especially in terms of climate change. I think it's very frequent that the news is so depressing surrounding. It's like, this species died out, this one's gone extinct, this one, this, that, and the other. There's so much like pessimism around it, but actually there is things that we can still actively do, and like petitions we can sign, and just little movements that we can take. Like, us being sat here, like me in England, I can't really do anything for Puerto Rico directly. There's so many indirect things that you can do, even just like learning more about your organization and what you do in itself is helping.
So
So with that note, I was going to ask you, so you saying about the coral nurseries, is there any type of species in specific that you want to grow in some of the nurseries? Does it depend on where you are in the island? Like, how do you decide kind of what grows where?
Yeah. So a big factor is what's needed to grow. So right now, our main focus is designing nurseries that can provide for acropora, which are branching corals. They're known as commonly as elkhorn and staghorn corals. They are the big, beautiful branching corals that, when healthy, you see just a giant forest of all around the reef. And they provide shelter, they protect beach erosion, and unfortunately, those are the ones that are most in need. I believe Puerto Rico has lost nearly 90% of its acropora species. Fortunately, they are one of the fastest growing corals. So restoring them, if it were another coral, we'd be struggling quite a bit. So the restoration process can go quite quickly, but they desperately need protection because there's a reason that 90% of them have died off. They grow very fast, so they're more susceptible to being damaged. If you think of a big, giant branching tree, it has all a weak point at every single little joint, especially compared to like a boulder coral, which is this massive rock that, is much more able to withstand a hurricane.
Yeah, sturdier for sure.
Yeah. So those are the two that we're focused on, elkhorn and staghorn coral. With the amount of time that I've spent out surveying, which is probably,
Wow.
I have yet to see thickets of staghorn. Now, it very well could be I'm just not at the right place at the right time, but it's that obvious of a problem that this coral that should be dominating the reefs and that should be everywhere is hard for someone to find. It's hard for someone who's always in the ocean to find,
Mhm.
right? I try to spend at least half my week in the ocean and still struggling to find healthy populations.
So then that must become the priority in a way now.
Exactly. So we're trying to prioritize the ones that need prioritizing. And what a lot of organizations do is it's a mix of what's needed, what's available, and specific corals that need protection. I just heard a crazy story recently about a single piece of coral that got transported by boat, getting dragged in the water from one side of the island to the other. And it took like 10 hours. But it's this one species of rare coral that was dying off because of what it was being exposed to. So the organization got kicked into high gear, and a lovely volunteer transported it for 12 hours across the island. And they've got it in a restoration tank, and they're slowly making sure, it's food, it's got proper water conditions, and it's got proper acidity levels so that eventually they can put that coral back out into the ocean, back out into the ecosystem where it belongs.
That's so interesting. I think when you mentioned the coral nurseries, though, I'm curious as to, and I'm guessing listeners would be curious too, as to if the conditions are bad, is it best to grow them kind of in captivity, then put them back into the ocean, or grow the nurseries straight out into the ocean? Like, what's the kind of approach your organization is taking with that?
Yeah, there's a couple of different mindsets. There's two options growing what's called in situ and ex situ. In layman's terms, it means that you're either growing the corals in the environment where they'll be transplanted, or you're growing the corals in an out of the water tank where you're able to monitor and control every variable. I wish I had the funding and the equipment and the space and the personnel to run an onshore nursery.
Eventually.
Eventually, fingers crossed. I'm not in a rush. I know how badly growing too quickly goes, but that is a later plan. And starting with it's starting with what's accessible is our goal right now. And so yes, we are at the whim of the variables of the ocean. If the waters heat up too much, our samples will become unhappy. And you can do very little to control, the ocean. If the ocean temperatures rise and it kills your samples, it's terrible. But you can do a couple of things to make sure that you're picking a great spot, proper protection. And there's all kinds of research actually going on now with developing coral covers so that it doesn't get too much exposure to UVA and UVB, and it doesn't kill the corals from heat exposure. And there's all kinds of new development happening in the field, which is extremely exciting. All kinds of amazing research. But in short, we are growing in the water so that we can eventually build up a foundation and establish on-land nurseries so that we can, go as far as selectively breeding certain corals. Because just like us, some of us are better at jumping, some of us are better at running, some of us can think faster than others. Corals have natural advantages over each other. So there are genotypes that have more resistance to heat, or better resistance to high acidity, or, have stronger immunity to disease. And so one of the really cool aspects of organizations here and their work is that they're breeding specific genotypes. They can say, and there's a really great organization out of the Bahamas, Coral Vita, and they are going another level, even further. They've got on-land tanks, and they're testing to see which genotypes of corals can survive future predicted ocean temperatures.
Wow.
Yeah, so
That's like thinking ahead.
they are an incredible organization, and they're well established, and it's this aspect of, okay, if our oceans are going to be this warm by the year 2030, we need corals that can survive. So they take an array of corals in different genotypes and they expose them, and they say, okay, well, these 3 did well with the temperature, but they didn't do well with the acidity, but these 2, and then they can breed them selectively and use eugenics to breed a coral that's more likely to survive in the future, so that if you plant them now in 2024, by the year 2030, they'll be able to survive the heat waves, and they'll be able to survive a more acidic ocean if we fail at slowing those things down.
That research must be insane to do.
Yeah.
That's so cool. I guess the whole goal is to create a community. It's you can't just have even in land ecosystems, you can't just have certain species. You need everything kind of working together, because I'm guessing with a healthy community of corals comes all the other organisms, or the other fish species, or the algae. All of that kind of comes along with that. So it sounds like a tough task.
And there's so many things we don't understand as well. I believe it was out of Japan. They just released a study where they recorded the sounds of a healthy reef, and then at an unhealthy, a diseased or dead reef, they played those audio recordings back on speakers, and the reef started growing. It's beyond my pay grade of understanding at the moment. I'm still reading the research and I'm trying to understand it, but it's this level of sound affects the corals and how they populate, and there's all these variables that we're not even aware of impacting the reefs. We're kind of just diving in head first and saying, okay, well, what if we do this? What if we do this? There's another group that's feeding sharks because the shark populations disappeared and the reefs started dying. And they said, what if we bring the sharks back? And so they started chumming waters near reefs, and the reefs started prospering better. And it's just incredible ecosystem that is far too complicated for any one mind to understand. And so thank goodness we have organizations all around the world piecing it together and working together to build hopefully healthier reefs.
It's you have to understand, you have to connect and understand kind of how the ecosystem works, and even just try and make up hypothesis. I'm guessing someone just must have thought, you know what, maybe sound might work. All these ideas, I think humans, we have such a creativity that we can make the most of and kind of to help save our corals. I saw about a coral project, this might be years ago, but where they were sinking structures on purpose. I think they're made out of cement or something, because the corals grew well on them, just sinking them on purpose so that corals could grow on them. So it is all about like getting creative in the ways that we conserve, because I think conservation is all about that. It's not about restoring, like how far back are you going to restore? There's this whole debate. This might be a bit too philosophical, so I might have to cut this out. But there's this whole like debate about conservation, how far ago you're trying to restore, because even like species on their own evolve. So it's like, what kind of ecosystem are you trying to restore? And I think we have to try find a way of advancing as we advance, also keep the organisms advancing in a healthy way. That might be a bit too, because I mean, you can go into the whole like, what is conservation? How far back?
Yeah, that's
go?
that's a good conversation for people to be exposed to. Is, you know, the concept of conservation is not changing, right? And while that's a beautiful idea, it's also impossible, right? Because nature naturally changes, right? Nature could decide this species isn't suitable to survive,
Get out.
and they die, right? And that's a sad but natural process, right? Nature is this brutal God that will destroy things on demand. And so it's a balance of saying, what should we change? What shouldn't we change? And so there's people building artificial reefs, right? Massive, massive artificial reefs. There are these enormous, giant concrete structures, and they're sinking them into the ocean because you can then plant corals and create this entire ecosystem on them. And, you know, some diehard conservationists will say, that's wrong. You're changing what was there. And others will say, what an amazing idea. You're revolutionizing restoration. And so there is no right and wrong answer, in my opinion. And I definitely am on board with trying things to figure out if they work. I think the easiest way to have any kind of system that doesn't work is you become too afraid to try. Definitely don't change things to a point of no return, but try things, you know, research them. That's another big aspect of one of the future goals of my organization is, while we're growing, we're conducting all kinds of research so that not only, you know, are the corals that we're growing going out onto the reef and restoring them, but we're learning more about best restore them. We have five rough rubrics on studies that we'd like to do on the corals that we grow. And all of them will hopefully help us tweak coral growth overall, but maybe just in Puerto Rico, right? Maybe just on the north shore of Puerto Rico, it's better to keep corals uncovered than covered, because then once you outplant them, they don't have that covering and they're not protected, right? There's all these incredible tiny little details that we have to study and record so that we can hopefully figure out what's the best way to do things here.
I guess that's like a massive pro of kind of starting things from zero in your case. So like starting your nurseries, like you've got plans for different ones, but it's also trialing, kind of seeing what works, because each location's different, each climate is different. The coral species that you find in Puerto Rico might not be the same that you find on some other coast, but it must be really lovely to have that freedom to kind of just give things a go and then have the opportunity, okay, that didn't work, let's try this. Do you know what I mean? Like that kind of trial and error space must be really nice to kind of have that flexibility.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, I'm looking forward to every step along the way. This process has been very slow to start compared to the normal kind of work I do. Usually I have to jump in head first, and it's just like you're working tirelessly with your hands on a computer in the field, treating patients. And, you know, with corals, as it should be, it's a protected ecosystem. So you need to get your permitting done. You need to get your licensing done. And so right now, the only thing stopping us is waiting to get our permits approved, making sure that the area that we've selected is optimal for coral nurseries. And then also just our government paperwork. We're waiting back. We've been waiting on the IRS way too many months out. But once we're all approved, we'll be ready to dive in head first.
I mean, good things come to those who wait. So
Yep. Go ahead. No, our permitting is overseen by the Center of Natural Resources here in Puerto Rico. Yeah, I know they've conducted a lot of research, and they've also helped with resources for a couple organizations here. They also want data from organizations here. No, thankfully, I have a good relationship with the director of natural resources. It's just a matter of, carving out time in her schedule to finalize the permits and also finish all the inspection of the sites. Measuring, we have to measure temperature and acidity for a certain amount of time before she's like, go ahead. So right now we're in this process of getting everything checked so that we can start the work. Yeah. So we have additional requirements because it's Puerto Rico. No. So we finished our 501c3 paperwork about 8 months ago. And then what we had to do was file Puerto Rico nonprofit status as well. If you're 501c3, you can operate in Puerto Rico, but you get a lot more benefits by having both.
So I wanted to ask you a bit about social media for outreach. So I know your platform posts a lot of photos, lots of videos of the work that you do. How have you been using social media to kind of reach like communities and kind of an audience?
Yeah. Social media, I've had a mixed relationship with social media. I have a big background in photography, and posting on social media was always kind of just like, here's a way for me to collect the things that I've done. And then, I got that nice little dopamine hit when I had a certain number of followers or a certain number of clicks. But it's been nice because I've gotten to restructure my view of social media with this organization. Right now, social media is a big aspect of what we're doing because we don't have the permitting yet for our nurseries. But social media is how we're showing people what's out, how we're showing people our coral reefs. When we're not taking them to the reefs and showing them in person, we get to show them online and also build a name for our organization. We've been trying to have a more strict posting regimen and putting out video content, photo content to everyone, but we're using it as an educational platform and a way for people to fall in love with the oceans who maybe are too nervous or too scared or don't have the opportunity to go out in person. And so we post content, everything from here's a silly video of, me almost drowning because I got tangled up in my float line, or here's a video of this most beautiful angelic stingray, or here's a photo, explaining what this species is and how it benefits us, and really getting people to know the reef and encourage them to, learn as much as they can about it. It's around them. It's all over the island. It's part of their home, and we love them to be able to enjoy as much of their home as possible.
It's such a good way of educating, isn't it? Like, I think traditional education, like in a classroom and actually people out in the field, is so great. Each one has its kind of pros and cons, but through videos and photos, you can truly just show people what sometimes they're not able to see just because they can't travel that far, and just kind of inspire people on the other side of the world. I do think social media can be used to such an advantage, especially in the marine biology world.
And it has been so helpful in building a community as well. I've been very surprised by it. Just random people finding our page and saying, hey, I am in Puerto Rico 3 months a year. Can I volunteer? And they'll DM us and we'll add them to our WhatsApp volunteer group chat. And it's just these amazing people who want to do work and want to go out and do more and find our page. And we have 2 girls in Florida who are like, hey, do you guys have any, internships or volunteer opportunities? We need time and, we need hands-on experience. And one of our sister organizations that we're working with is just started an intern project where they're taking in people and, getting them situated, and they're staying here for a month and they're working with them. And that's something we are in the midst of finalizing, because we really want people from all over to be able to contribute to this project.
It's so easy to kind of reach out to people, isn't it, nowadays, and kind of get into contact. I mean, us here as well. Do you know what I mean? And I think like having social media as a conservation organization, it just kind of like boosts you on educating, and like even scientific education can still be done like in a way that all audiences can understand it as well. I think that's something that conservation organizations do really well. It's kind of like science things aren't just for scientists, it's for everyone. You can be 12 years old and watch these videos and understand it and fall in love with it. So I think it's really good that you can get that kind of balance. And I think from your social media, from what I've seen, I've really enjoyed that, like how much I've personally learned just from like seeing your posts and seeing your videos and all that as well.
Just happy to hear that.
I was going to say, one thing that you do as well is the Spanish and English. So obviously Puerto Rico is a very bilingual island, but Reef Safe does their social media in Spanish and English. How did you come about deciding, like, is it an equal balance? Do you do posts in certain languages? Like, how does
Deciding that was very hard, just because our number one focus is Puerto Rico, Puerto Rican reefs, Puerto Ricans. It's my ability to give back to an island that's given me so much, and I want it to be accessible to people who live here. While most of Puerto Rico is completely bilingual, if there are kids who find our page and don't speak English very well, or if there are older generations that didn't get taught English in school, we want them to be able to benefit from our material. So as of now, we're doing any kind of videos that have English in them. We'll try to put Spanish subtitles in them, and eventually we'll be switching vice versa, doing main media content in Spanish with English subtitles. That way it's just as accessible as possible. Accessibility is hugely important, especially in something where people are volunteering, right? You're volunteering your time to learn about your reefs. You're volunteering your time to clean the oceans. If you're volunteering yourself, it should be as easy as possible. And so doing content, thankfully, I have a lovely Puerto Rican girlfriend who has taught me most of the Spanish I know. And I've been able to become quite fluent. And so it helps being able to put content out quite quickly in Spanish as well.
I guess it's an extra way of connecting with the people themselves. I think people, like, conservation starts by kind of the people that are in that environment, isn't it? And just having them have that content as well, even if they, as you said, like don't like being next to the ocean or have that fear or prejudice or whatever, like stopping them from going in the ocean and connecting, then if they can have the social media that they can access, understand and relate to, then like what a great way of doing it. So I think we're in the time to move on to the wild stories segment of the show. So for those of you who don't know, the wild stories section of Wild and Unprotected is basically where anything goes. So Gray here can tell us the wildest stories about whatever stuff he wants to say. And yeah, I'm excited to listen to what you have to tell us. So go ahead, take it away.
Well, this is, I think, 3 weeks ago now. I was down in Cabo Rojo with a friend of mine, actually my vice president, Justin. And we were spending all day out on the boat, surveying reefs, spearfishing, interacting with marine life and exploring. It's a huge part of what we do out there is just see what's out there. And we had just finished, I think it was our third day in a row, so we were absolutely exhausted. And we were doing 8-hour days of diving and we're changing locations and diving, free diving. So lots of breath holding. And we were coming back into the port. We were exhausted. We were hungry. And on our way back, you see this giant black mass on the surface. And Justin and I turned to each other, like, that's a massive shark. That's a massive bull shark. That must be just the biggest bull shark I've ever seen here. We turned. We're looking at it. It's so slow. I don't think it's a... And we look at it more and we look at it more. It felt like eternity, but it was probably 45 total. My God, it's a massive dolphin. It's one of like the biggest dolphins I've ever seen. We were thinking that must be an older dolphin because it had lots of scarring on the top of it and was moving quite slowly. And then we looked up and there were 20 dolphins all around us in the boat. And I've been wanting to swim with dolphins my entire life. And what do we do? What do we do? Because we both got nervous immediately once we were surrounded. So we killed the engine and we saw where they were swimming to, and we kept our distance, and then saw them started to drive where they were headed, and they were so interactive. They came up and jumping at the boat. They had 2 babies with them that were no more than maybe 2 feet long, and one of the babies jumped up towards the boat and turned away at the last second. It's like, Justin, we have to get in the water with these guys. They're so interactive. We were both a little nervous, but super excited. And I just impromptu, I was like, I need to get photos and videos. I need to show people like the dolphins that we have in Puerto Rico. So I have a broken ankle, no fins on, and no
the
goggles.
context of the broken ankle as well.
Yeah. By the way, I broke my ankle recently. No, it's not broken. It's just that the ligament is severely damaged. But we're walking, which is improvement.
Progress.
So I jump in the water with my camera, and I realize I have no fins on, no goggles on. I can't see anything. And I just start swimming forward and hoping for the best. And take a big breath, and I dive down, and it is the most, we'll be posting the videos very shortly. It was one of the most magical experiences. At least 15 dolphins swam within 3 feet of me and, looked at me and it swam around me. And it was incredible. Terrifying because I could not see very well. Fun fact, a dolphin and a shark look very similar.
When you can't see.
Yeah, like a couple of schools went by and then the last one that swam by was massive. And I was like, oh, that was a shark. There was a shark eating amongst all the dolphins because it wasn't a shark. Don't worry.
Thank God.
But I was convinced. I was so convinced. And I was like, it's okay. The odds of there being shark hanging out with dolphins, they don't get along. There's no way. And we got back on the boat, and Justin got in the water and got to swim with them. And I'm really looking forward that the videographer, photographer, and me got so excited when I reviewed the
I'm
footage.
surprised that you actually got like decent videos because like
I couldn't see.
you must have been like swimming underwater, like not being able to see.
I had one hand because the other hand was holding the camera, and I had one leg because one of them is busted. But the videos turned out incredibly. And it was part luck, part right place, right time, part years of experience.
So experienced.
Once you get to this level, no, I'm kidding.
Once you get to 24, yeah.
Once you get to
years
24,
of experience.
things it's all easy from there.
Well, I'm glad it wasn't a bull shark.
I'm very glad it wasn't bull shark as well. I would have also jumped in the water probably had it been a large bull shark, but I would have stayed much closer to the boat.
Yeah.
It's actually one of the cooler things that I've seen about a marine life is the de-villainification of sharks recently. I remember probably 12 years ago, sharks were the scariest, most dangerous things in the world. And now you can go on Instagram and, people snuggle sharks. Did not know that sharks liked to cuddle, but sharks, there's divers who are scuba diving down and petting and cuddling with sharks. And part of me is conflicted about that because I'm like, no, if we should be convincing these sharks that we're very. But then the other part of me is like, how wrong we had it. That sharks are just out to get you and out to eat you. That they're just an animal,
I
existing.
agree. I think there's both sides. Like, there's like putting this idea out of like, look, it's me and my bestie. Like that's probably not the way to go about it. And then also it is that it's like the stereotype of like, you see a shark that's gonna eat you. Like, no, like I think most of the times when you do end up swimming accidentally with sharks, I did in Hawaii by accident, you just see it and it just swims past you. You're like, you're just in your own world. I'm in my own world. I'm gonna stay on this side. You do whatever you want to do. And it's just a very like, you do your thing, I'll do mine kind of environment. So I think there's it's both sides of it. I think bull sharks still would like intimidate me if I saw that. I would probably
No, I would be
internally have a,
scared. Higher. Yes.
but you would
Yeah.
jump in.
I would do it scared.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess so. But
But yeah, like my mother, terrified of sharks. Absolutely terrified of sharks. Well,
mm,
even if someone says she once saw a shark there at one point and never since, she will not go in because she's so scared of sharks.
wow.
Whereas I'm got a camera and I'm trying to chase them and get a good video and photo so I can show people, there is no inherent need for fear. You still have to be smart. They are an apex predator and have been for hundreds of thousands of years. You don't want to piss them off, but they're not there to eat.
I guess it's like that's wildlife overall, isn't it? I'm in your space, but I don't want to harm you. You don't want to harm me either. Let's just both do our own thing. It's kind of that. I mean, I think it's like that anyways. I mean, humans, we have done a pretty awful job at like getting in animal spaces a bit too close to home.
No, I always advocate for know your place, right? We're so detached from animals, it's sometimes hard to know our place. But in the animal kingdom, we're just we're a sack of meat. Like a rhinoceros can get shot and walk it off, right? A shark can devour you and jump out of the water. In the animal kingdom, we don't stand a chance against 99% of them. So just know your place, right? If the shark wanted to, they could do something, but 99% of the time they don't. So as long as you don't make it so that 1% happens, you should be okay.
This is completely irrelevant, but what you were saying just reminds me of, like, I love seeing, like, the meme online, which is, like, if it's not a friend, why make it friend shapes? And it's, like, bears with, like, their little, like, oh, bear paws are so cute. Okay, so I guess we're coming up to the closing segment of the episode, unfortunately.
That went by so fast.
I know, so tragic. But it would be great for you to tell the listeners how they can get involved and how they can help Reef Safe.
Yeah. If you live in Puerto Rico or you are visiting, feel free to reach out to us. Our Instagram and Facebook are reefsafe.com. We're pretty responsive and we'll give you all kinds of great marine excursions, places to go see turtles, reefs to go explore, because that's our main goal is to have people be able to have a healthy relationship with the ocean. Make sure that the ocean is healthy enough to maintain that relationship. Follow us on social media. And if you want to learn about reefs or see beautiful pictures of marine life, there you can find our petition to ban chemical sunscreens in Puerto Rico, which, as we've talked about, is a really important mission of ours. And other than that, just do your part in keeping the oceans happy and healthy. That's all we can ask of your viewers and our followers is do their part, do what they think is best, and enjoy the ocean.
Yeah, I mean, I thought this was a very fun episode. It was great to hear your stories and also great for me to learn more about corals because I love corals. They're really cute, really wholesome. So it was great to hear more about it for sure. Yeah, so give Gray a follow on social media, Instagram, all of that stuff. Facebook as well, right? Same.
Facebook as well.
Facebook as well.
For all of our followers, check out Wild and Unprotected. It is a great organization that gave us this incredible opportunity to share our message.
Yeah, and then also we will be adding, obviously for those listening on Spotify, this is all in English, but if you go to the YouTube versions or the extended versions, the video format of this episode will have Spanish captions as well for those of you that speak Spanish or want to listen to it in Spanish or see the translations, whatever, doesn't matter. The two options are there for everyone. Yeah, great. It was great to have you on as a guest. So
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, we'll see you next week with a new episode. So you probably won't see me. You'll probably see Ethan. But yeah, so see you next week.